Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. This week's episode, we will be finishing our coverage of Jason Aaron's miniseries, Punisher, the King of Killers. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. As you can see, I am by myself this week. So, unfortunately, due to some unforeseen circumstances, Luke is unable to be a part of the show for a while. So it's pretty much just going to be me by myself.
What, am I not good enough for you, huh? I'm not enough?
No, but seriously, I will be doing this mostly by myself, but I will be having some like guest co-hosts come on every once in a while as well. To wrap up this Punisher run, I'm going to be doing this myself. So before we get into the actual story, some quick news. So apparently a sequel to Carr Andrews' Spider-Man Reign, the controversial dystopian future take on Spider-Man, will be getting a sequel, first issue coming out this July, still written by Carr Andrews. And apparently this series will also touch on Miles Morales and what he is up to in this future. But a few things from the writer, Carr Andrews. He says, I never imagined that I would ever be creating a sequel to a comic series from so long ago. This original series came out in 2006. My first major work in comics. Nor did I anticipate that a 4-issue miniseries would continue to vibrate in the public consciousness today. But without fail, Spider-Man Reign is mentioned in articles, lists, and social media posts. Many call it the most infamous Spider-Man story ever told, but for me, what's kept it relevant is the love behind creating that book. This is the character I grew up with, the one that taught me how to be a man, how to live with failure, and keep standing back up, the unrelenting force of trying to make things better. Reign was full of tragic and dark absurdity that only a young creator could come up with, a way to challenge the idea of personal power and responsibility. But as I've grown older, and after sitting with this story for so long, I started to ask myself this question. What if there was a way to go back and change what happened? What if I could fix everything? Now, I'm not sure if that's like a tease at what's going to happen in the story, if there's like time travel or what. I don't know. No extra details. I've actually never actually read the original Spider-Man Reign. It's always like it's a story I've heard of, but I've never read it myself. So we'll probably cover it on the show when Spider-Man Reign 2 comes around the corner. I believe the first issue is going on sale on July 3rd. So that's the little piece of news I had for you. So let's get into the story. So, quick recap from our last episode. The Punisher has joined the Hand because they have resurrected his wife, and he has become their leader slash assassin, their Fist of the Beast. And he is slowly being possessed by the beast, the demon the Hand worships. He's kind of ruffling the feathers of the superhero community and the world at large. And when we last left off, Daredevil showed up at the Hand stronghold and was trying to talk Frank out of what he's doing. So getting into the actual book here, Punisher, the King of Killers, Part 2 was written by Jason Aaron, with art by Jesus Saiz and Paul Azaceta. The colorists are Dave Stewart and Matt Hollingsworth, and the letterer was VC's Corey Petit. These issues were released between November 2022 and May 2023. The story begins with a flashback to before Frank's family was murdered and before Frank became the Punisher. Maria has taken a job at the local Catholic church, and one day she confesses to her priest she has been having dreams of Frank as the devil coming to hurt her family. The priest doesn't take Maria's confession seriously and thinks she's just worried for Frank's soul, and he tells Maria to bring Frank to confession. Maria is still worried about Frank as he begins to demonstrate weird behavior at home. Frank has taken to sleeping in a tent in the backyard, his pistol by his side. He barely talks to Maria or their children. In the present, Daredevil confronts Frank about allying himself with the Hand and leading a string of gruesome murders. A fight ensues, and Daredevil attempts to excise the Beast from Frank with a spell he learned from Doctor Strange. The Beast is too powerful, though, and Frank uses his powers, including strength and flight, to defeat Daredevil. Frank lets Daredevil go, though, instead of killing him, and he returns to his wife. Going back to the flashback, Maria leaves the kids with Frank as she is in the hospital for a few days after a hysterectomy. She comes home to find Frank and the kids outside, napping together in Frank's tent. This relieves many of Maria's fears about Frank, and Frank begins sleeping with her again instead of out in the backyard. Frank goes to confession at Maria's request, but after the confession, Maria is fired from her job at the church, seemingly from what Frank said to the priest. As Frank leaves the church after his confession, we see as he is haunted by dozens of dead souls, some he killed, some he saw be killed. Back in the present, Frank tells his wife that his mission is almost over. Maria asks about their children again, and Frank finally admits that they aren't going to be coming home. Maria begins to have memories of her death, but she isn't sure what they mean. Meanwhile, Ares leads his apostles to the Hand stronghold, using captured members of the Hand to direct their path. Returning once again to the past, Maria and Frank attend marriage counseling, which doesn't go very well. Frank ends up having to get a second job, but soon Maria realizes he's actually attending public executions instead of working. Maria considers death Frank's lover. One night, Maria follows Frank after one of the executions. She follows him to a bar, where she witnesses Frank beat a man nearly to death for bragging about his contract killings. Maria is worried as she enjoyed seeing Frank in action, and she feels that this is what Frank is meant to do. In the present, as Ares continues to make his way to the Hand stronghold, Frank begins demonstrating nearly all the gifts of the Beast, including healing and strength. Maria leaves her room and attempts to find more information on her children and why she is there, but she is stonewalled and soon corralled back to her room by the Archpriestess. Upon realizing that Ares is coming to attack them, Frank has his ceremonial knife that was broken during his last encounter with Ares reforged into bullets. While Frank and the Hand meet Ares and the Apostles in battle, Daredevil talks to Wolverine about Frank's behavior and how he's gone off the rails. Wolverine then tells Black Widow, who talks to Captain America about how they need to stop the Punisher. During a flashback, we see the Hand keeping tabs on Frank's life under the Archpriestess's orders. The Hand and ninjas suggest killing Frank's family to get rid of distractions to Frank's true calling, but the Archpriestess says no. In the present, a huge battle erupts between Punisher and Ares. After a brutal fight, Punisher slays Ares and orders his apostles executed. Frank tells his men that the Archpriestess is not to be trusted, and Maria accepts her role as the Queen of the Hand. Meanwhile, Wolverine, Black Widow, Captain America, Moon Knight, and Doctor Strange conspire to stop Frank. Frank then continues his reign of terror on the worst criminals the world has to offer, killing people considered untouchable with his newfound powers. After every assassination, Frank comes home to Maria, claiming that his mission is almost completed, but Maria is not convinced. While Frank is away, Maria continues to dig into what happened to her children. She eventually finds the many graves of her children, as Frank had attempted to resurrect them multiple times. Cutting back to Frank, he is leading a mission against a white supremacist group, easily slaughtering them. With the eyes of the Beast, he sees them as demonic monsters that confess all of their wrongdoings to him. But the last remaining member of the group is a child, and Frank refuses to kill him, much to the Archpriestess's chagrin. As Frank leaves, his former allies confront him and attack him. Doctor Strange attempts to remove the Beast from Frank, but Frank overpowers the heroes and begins to fly back to his base. The heroes continue attacking Frank on his way, but he is able to overpower them without mortally wounding them. He explains that he is doing his best to hold back the power of the Beast that is compelling him to kill them. In a brief flashback, We return to the day of Frank's family's murder. It turns out Maria was planning on divorcing Frank, and she told him this right before she and her children were shot. Meanwhile, back to the present, at the Hand Stronghold, Maria searches their archives for information on the Punisher. She is shocked and angered at how many people Frank has slaughtered in the name of her and her children. Frank finally makes it back, but Maria confronts him and shoots him with the special bullets he crafted earlier. As Frank is on the ground, seemingly dying, the Archpriestess arrives and tells Frank that they will just resurrect him and start over, grooming him until they finally make him a worthy Fist of the Beast. Frank uses the last of the Beast's power within him to attack and wound the Archpriestess. We then get one final flashback, where we see Frank on the day of his family's funeral, slaughtering criminals at a well-known mob hangout, which was seemingly his first stint as the Punisher. Frank passes out and wakes up chained in a dusty basement. Each of his former friends and allies condemn him and try to reason with him, but Frank remains unrepentant. Then Maria walks in, explaining that Black Widow helped her find a way to stay alive without the Hand's magic potions. She took some of Frank's assets and is going to lead her own life, away from Frank. As Frank is finally left alone, he pulls the bullets Maria shot into him out and calls up the power of the Beast one last time. After deciding what to do with Frank, the group of heroes appear to Frank to deliver his sentence, but it is too late. Charged with the power of the Beast, Frank disappears. The story ends with the Archpriestess still alive, searching for a new Fist of the Beast, as well as Maria driving away with a positive pregnancy test in her bag. In the book's epilogue, we see Frank in some unknown hellscape, living a peaceful nomadic lifestyle as he helps a group of unknown orphan children. So that was Punisher King of Killers Part 2. Normally I would ask what Luke thinks, but since it's just me, I loved this series, honestly. I had read like half of it, collecting the books as they came out, but I missed a lot of them, so it was nice to get the whole story from beginning to end. I think this is, I said this last week, but I think it's a really cool study, like character study of Punisher, kind of breaking him down a bit and seeing like how much he'll bend before like his code kind of breaks, I suppose. Also shows up how much Frank is like willing to give up and kind of rationalize his actions based on like his family, getting his family back. And I think it's kind of cool to have Punisher have backup. Like he normally works by himself or maybe one or two other close allies, but to have like a whole army at his beck and call to really help him take down huge like crime kingpins and like organized crime lords is kind of a cool concept. I think I thought it was pretty cool, and it's kind of interesting to see Frank kind of try to be a ninja, even though he's not the greatest at it. You know, he's not the greatest at using the sword and everything. I really loved the art in this. The art was very cool, very visceral. We talked last episode, me and Luke, that we didn't love the art from the flashbacks, but I will say it grew on me. I definitely prefer like the main timeline art, but I definitely got used to and came to appreciate the flashback art for the most part. I also liked in the story how it incorporated like these heroes and how they reacted to Frank. It's kind of interesting, like how far they're willing to let Frank go. Like obviously, you know, he's never really on the best of terms with them, but they normally kind of tolerate him as long as he's only taking on like street level killers. But once he's like joining the Hand and becoming part of this big assassin cult, they're definitely not as on board. I thought that was interesting, and I think the whole character of the Punisher brings up a lot of moral issues and talking points. Um, you know, because he's kind of a representation of like a broken system, I guess, and that's why it's so like off-putting when, say, like police officers or people who are part of the institution like use the Punisher's logo, because kind of the whole point, and I believe the creator of Punisher said something along these lines of like the whole point of the Punisher is that the system has failed. Like the only reason he exists is because the system isn't doing its job. Like ideally, a person like him shouldn't need to exist, but because of like how evil things are, how there's so many evil people, also because the institutions are aren't really doing their jobs. The justice system fails in so many ways. A person like him kind of has to exist in a way. It's very interesting. I'm sure some people would think that's not the case. That person like Punisher shouldn't exist. And obviously people in his world think that in the Marvel universe. It is a very interesting topic. I don't want to get like too into it, like too much of a like debate, but it is an interesting. Like I think that scene in Daredevil, the Netflix show, is perfect. The debate between Daredevil and Frank. I think not only does it really emulate the comics, but I think it is a really interesting debate about justice and like when is it or is it ever right to take a life, to save somebody else or to stop somebody from hurting somebody else, things like that. It's very interesting. I think that's the whole like I was saying earlier, I feel like the Punisher character really opens up the conversation and brings that kind of debate into the forefront whenever like a story focuses on the Punisher. So I'm very intrigued. Kind of going away from the series, I'm very intrigued to see what they do with Punisher and the Daredevil, the new Daredevil show that's coming out, and if they're gonna like touch on that at all again, or if he just gonna like show up and be like, "I'm Punisher, okay, bye." But yeah, that's one of the reasons I always found Punisher so interesting. Is he kills very indiscriminately, but it's kind of hard to blame him with the kind of horrible people that he kills. And generally, he goes after people that the other heroes are kind of ignoring or aren't actually stopping. They'll like throw him in prison for like, a few months and then they'll be out doing bad things again. So it's kind of, in a way, he's kind of the bad guy of the good guys. And I feel like this story really shows that because it delves a lot into how Frank is just kind of he's just a very violent person and he seems almost drawn to violence, but he directs that violence in a somewhat positive way, like at least against like horrible people. So it's kind of he's an interesting character to delve into because most people like him that are that prone to violence usually hurt innocent people. So I just find his character very interesting, and I really liked where this series went with him. Kind of explored his character. I wasn't sure how I felt about Maria and like their marriage kind of being on the rocks um before they were killed, before Maria and the kids were killed. I feel like it almost kind of in a way invalidates Punisher's mission or something because the whole time he's kind of acting like his wife and kids were taken away from him, which they were, but it always kind of suggested that things were all happy. And I feel like most adaptations show that they were just a nice happy family before the tragedy happened. But this kind of retcons that and changes that around, and it kind of stems from Frank and his violent ways kind of ruined his family life. I found that simultaneously interesting and kind of challenging. I didn't like love it at first, but I came to kind of appreciate it. But yeah, pretty cool series. I really liked it. Even though I did give, a breakdown of the series, I would still suggest checking it out yourself. It's still worth a read. Now, to wrap things up, I'm going to give my cultured picks for this week. Normally, I have Luke here with me to give his cultured picks, but obviously that's not an option. So I have a few comics that I've read recently that I picked out and I thought were worth mentioning. So number one, we have Avengers Twilight number 5. This just came out a couple of days ago. This continues the Avengers Twilight series. Is basically like it's kind of like the Kingdom Come of the Marvel universe. If it focuses on a future where heroes are either in hiding or killed and they've been replaced by government entities. And it turns out that the people in charge are Tony Stark's son and some evil people, and it's very interesting. I would definitely suggest checking it out. It's a very good series so far. There's only going to be 6 issues, which is a bummer. I hope they do more with it in the future. Now, the next one on my list, my next pick is Hellblazer Dead in America #4. This is set in the Sandman universe, as you can see. So, like honestly, if you're a fan of Constantine and or the Sandman, I would definitely check this out. It's kind of in its own pocket universe, if you will. It's part of the DC Black label. I've been enjoying this series so far, but I think this issue might be the best in the series so far. I think it was just the most gripping, and it touches on themes of sexual assault and things like that. So it was very interesting. I would definitely check out this whole series as well as this issue in particular. And now my last pick is technically 2 books. There's this 3-part miniseries that's happening right now, being published, called The Batman First Night. It is another DC Black label story written by acclaimed DC writer Dan Jurgens. It's set in a world where Batman became Batman in 1939, like the same time he was introduced in Detective Comics. And it's basically a detective noir story of Batman first starting out, but in 1939. So it's very interesting. Like there's a lot of fun, like 1939 lingo in there. I think Dan Jurgens does a really good job writing for that time and making the characters feel pretty authentic. And yeah, it's just a really fun Elseworlds type story. I would definitely check that out if you're a Batman or detective story fan or anything like that. It's very fun. But yeah, that is my culture picks for this week. And that is going to be the show for this week. A little bit shorter because it's just me. Going forward, I can't say exactly when, but I will be having some more people on. So that'll be fun. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me this week. If you would like to help support us so we can keep bringing you more great content, you can check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd and look for the Cultured Pull list here. Thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., Salib K. Thank you so much to Jose Navarro, who designed our logo and visual assets. Thanks again for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you'd like to check out The Cultured Nerd on YouTube or social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left if you're watching this on your computer or TV. If you'd like to check out Casual Experts, me and Luke's other brand where we talk about all things nerdy and pop culture, you can scan the QR code on the bottom right.